When kids just won't listen, parents often feel stuck between two choices: to give in or get angry. It's exhausting. We give you the top techniques directly from the experts, helping you on your path to a more peaceful, respectful, and joyful life with your kids. Self-honoring, unique, respectful, empathic. That is what S.U.R.E. parenting is, as defined by our guest, Sami Bell. S.U.R.E, S-U-R-E. Self-honoring, unique, respectful, empathic. She teaches parents to use those building blocks to create the best childhood they can for their children. She is a wife, mother, teacher, and mentor. Professionally, her degree is in elementary education with additional studies in early childhood education and a focus on child development and child psychology. Personally, she overcame a volatile childhood and rewired her brain to eliminate strong triggers and harmful patterns so that she could become the mother she wanted to be. She uses these experiences to guide other parents through the journey towards a more peaceful, enjoyable relationship with their children. This episode is full of quotable tips that we love to post on our Instagram page. And because of her rich background in child development and real experience as a mother raising 3 kids, she has a lot of insight to share around toddler brain development and self-regulation. You'll get to hear her sing a little. She shares her personal self-regulating mantra, and she'll talk about the importance of vulnerability. So, if you want to be sure in parenting, make sure to tune into this episode. Here's Sami Bell. Sami Bell, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You've got a book, you've got workshops, you've got 3 kids, lots we can learn from you. So I'm looking forward to that. What is it that you love most about working with kids?
I love learning from kids. The way that they see the world challenges me to be more present, more positive, more open-minded. And if I allow for that pause between whatever they're doing and my reaction, I can really learn something every time. And that, I think, is unique to children.
Can you put that into words, what it is that you are learning from them in those moments?
I have learned that kids just are not bad. I was raised with the idea that there's good kids and bad kids. And the more children I work with, the more I realize that they are doing the best they can, just like we are. And as adults, we can remember that to help us stay calm and focus instead of trying to eradicate some specific behavior. We can focus on increasing their skill set so that they can do better and they can use something other than that behavior to meet their needs. So I just learned from them to really see the world through their eyes and understand a lot more of the why behind their more challenging behaviors than ideas.
So we were talking about the different ages and stages that you work with, and you were saying that most of your work is with certain ages, and that you're working now in the home with families. Can you tell us about that environment and what those ages are and what the challenges are there?
Absolutely. So my degree is in elementary education, and then I went and got certified in early elementary education, or early childhood education, actually. So the age ranges are most often in there, but the most calls I get are about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. And there's some reasons for that. As their brains are developing, kids hit challenging stages in the threes and in the fours. And we've heard about the idea of the terrible twos, but almost every parent I know would rather have their 2-year-old than their 3-year-old by the time they call me. So their brains are going through rapid development and they go through periods of time called disequilibrium. And when that's happening, the brain is sorting and processing everything that they've learned in their life so far. And it's doing a lot of behind the scenes work. And just as if your computer were backing everything up and would be running slower, their prefrontal cortex is running slower. And so that part of the brain is responsible for impulse control, thinking things through, following step after step after step, and completing something. All of the executive functions that we see adults able to use, kids struggle to use them. And in the 3-year-old, the 3.5-year-old particularly, will struggle immensely after a period where they seem to be able to do some of these things. So parents feel like they've lost something and they panic and they worry without having anybody to tell them, hey, this is part of development. It's much more like a roller coaster than a straight line. And then for 4-year-olds, they're entering the logic phase where they can start to understand things more deeply. And because of that, their view of the world changes and they are met with some confusion and they really need to retest everything that you are like, you already know this. I've already taught you this. Why are you doing this? That's their job. They have to retest all of those boundaries to see what still holds and what doesn't. They are so much more capable now, and they really don't know what they can and can't do now that they're in this new brain and new body. And so they try it out. On top of that, they comprehend now that they are a separate entity from their parents and they want a confident leader. And so they will try to figure out what that's going to look like and really understand that environment. And so if we look at their behavior as seeking to understand, then we teach them. If we look at their behavior as being bad, then we punish them. And the more we punish them, the more their behavior is confused and acting out. And for everybody's sake, I like to help parents to understand really what's going on inside the brain of the 3 or 4-year-old so that they know that they're not doing it wrong. This stage is tumultuous and amazing, and we can definitely get through it.
So how are they? How are the parents finding you, and what does it look like when you, how you show up for them?
Definitely. So usually I get a message in my Facebook group or my email or a call. I offer free calls for moms who just need a little bit of support real quick. I think we all need that person to just bounce some ideas off of. And so I'll get a call. Mom usually has 2 or more kids. She is a multitasking queen. She's got her flow, and she tells me that, her 3-year-old will be sitting there and playing with Legos, and she'll say, hey, it's bedtime, and he doesn't leave. And she's like, hey, it's bedtime. And he just sits there and ignores her. And she feels incredibly frustrated and disrespected because she's told him it's bedtime and he's just sitting there. Something like that. Or like their 4-year-old will be jumping on the couch and she says, don't jump on the couch. And they just keep jumping. And she's feeling that they know better. Why aren't they listening? And that feeling of frustration really is what brings them to me. And so I can work with them virtually, or I can actually come into their home and see the whole dynamic and give them strategies right there on the spot that help them to move forward.
That's awesome. Yeah, so 3 and 4-year-olds, definitely an exciting area, and it comes with a lot of challenges. Let's say you go into the home, and that's the call you've gotten. What's the first step? Where do you start in diagnosing and solving that?
Yeah, so I start by letting everybody know that I'm a safe person, particularly mom. Moms feel incredibly judged.
Your audio broke up again. You let everybody know what?
That they are safe with me. For moms, they tend to feel judged no matter what they do. And it's very important that mom feel calm and confident so that her child isn't picking up on that anxiety and stress. And I let her know that it's okay for kids to act like kids. I'm not judging you. So that's step one. I get to know the child. I talk to them, ask them to show me something that matters to them, and they develop trust with me. And within the first few minutes, the whole energy relaxes. And then I just let them go about their day. And I ask mom to show me the areas that she's concerned about. So when something like I mentioned earlier happens, when she says to the 3-year-old, if it's during bedtime, then I have already been informed that bedtime has been a struggle. But the same thing can be said for, hey, it's lunchtime, and they just keep playing. And right away, I give mom a few strategies kind of to the side, because the point is never to undermine the parent. It's never to parent over top of the parent. It's to empower the parent. And I will say to her a couple for that situation. One, when kids are grossed in their play, their ears may well stop processing information.
Right.
They can be so focused that they're not registering what you're saying. And so when you want them to do something, you might have to kind of break into their world. And there's a couple of really easy ways to do that. Proximity is a big one of them. Get closer. For my kids, touching them in some way always helps. Touching their shoulders, touching their hand, touching their cheek, the back of their head, any loving gesture to make sure that they notice you first. And then one of the things that we do as adults is we take shortcuts in our language. So when we say, hey, it's lunchtime, that is information that is not relevant necessarily to your 3-year-old unless they just asked you, when is lunchtime? What you mean is, I need you to stop playing with your Legos and walk to the table. But that's not what you said. And so it makes sense that their brains haven't yet registered this is important information. And so I will encourage her to shift her language just a little bit and make that connection. And most times, something that simple can totally break in for that 3-year-old. For the 4-year-old jumping on the couch, don't jump on the couch. The word don't, and more specifically the word not, is an opposite. It's an inaction. If I were to ask you to define don't, it would be challenging to define don't without the words do and not. That's just saying the same thing. And so if you struggle to tell your child what to do, then it's no wonder they struggle to know what to do when you say don't do something, particularly for younger children. Obviously, as they get older, they have amassed a vocabulary that allows them to work through that word and to use that word appropriately. But if I'm using that word and the kiddo's not responding, I want to change what I'm saying into a positive action, such as feet on the seat or something like that. And again, with making contact, if they're jumping and screaming and laughing and playing and they're so excited, they're resistant to that input that's going to stop that excitement for them. So we might have to touch their arm, touch their hands, make sure they're looking at us, something to that effect, so that they have made that connection with us and can receive our message.
Okay, so those are kind of the bigger two steps to get started, and you're saying that those two alone often get the job done of just having that appropriate proximity and making sure the language is clear. I know there's kind of a popular meme or whatever, people talk about explain like I'm 5, and when we're trying to learn something new, it helps to just explain it as if someone is a 5-year-old. And what that means is, yeah, to take all the assumptions out of the language. You'll hear parents say stuff like, well, you need to do this, or like you said, it's time for dinner, and those aren't really useful expressions to a child jumping on a couch.
Absolutely.
They're just not able to process that, right?
Absolutely. And something to note is that, sure, some kids can, but just because your oldest can doesn't mean your youngest can. And I think we get stuck in that comparison trap where we assume because this one 4-year-old, whether it's one of our own children or a friend's child or a niece or a nephew or whoever, well, they can do it, so my kid can too. They're just not. That doesn't help us at all. If your child's not doing it, something's getting in their way. And we can focus on solving that problem instead of just assuming that our kid's purposely trying to irritate us and feeling resentment and frustration and all of the feelings that get in the way of our connection.
So if you see someone who's doing that in a way that seems appropriate, they've got the proximity and they've got the language right, and their child is still ignoring them or just not cooperating, what are the next steps?
Absolutely. And this will happen. I would venture to say 100% of children will at some point not listen anyway because they're children. And so what I would say is expect that sometimes and take a calm, confident approach and take action. So what that would mean is I asked you to walk to the table. Your body's not moving yet. Do you want to move it yourself or do you need my help? And you give them that choice because choices are helpful. They engage the thinking brain. And they do have an option then if they want to walk over by themselves or if they want you to pick them up and take them to the table. And we, a lot of us have either gone the path of assuming that we just have to stand back and convince the child to listen and repeat ourselves over and over and over again. And unfortunately, what we're doing there is we are teaching them to actually not listen the first time we ask because we're going to ask 17 more times. And in most cases, result in kind of losing our cool. And then we're teaching them they don't actually have to listen until we've lost our cool. So we don't want to do that. We want to show them that we are going to make thoughtful requests and directions, and we mean them. So that means that we're going to help them uphold those directions really right away. We're going to make a statement. Oh, you know what? He probably didn't hear me because I wasn't connecting. I'll connect to him first. I'll restate my statement. He's still not listening. So now I'm going to let him know that I'm going to help him uphold this because this is not an option. We are going to the table. How we get there is totally up to you. And the other path that people might take is to assume again that the kid is being bad and that they need to be punished in order to listen. And that isn't the case either. They just have their own wants and their own needs, and they're meeting them just like we are. So we have to help them to understand that this is important. This is the path that we are going to take. I am happy for you to choose how you take it, but this is what we're going to do, and be that leader that they are seeking and craving. Children feel much more secure with a confident leader, not an angry leader, not a mean leader, but a confident leader. I liken it to an analogy that I put in my book where if you are swimming in the middle of the ocean by yourself, maybe for a moment it's exciting and exhilarating, but very quickly it's terrifying. There are no boundaries. There's no safety zone. There's so much unknown that it's overwhelming. It's the same for kids versus if you're swimming in a pool, there's sides, there's edges, there's stairs, there's a bench, there's, most likely there's some people around. You feel safe because there's boundaries. The boundaries don't have to do anything. They just have to exist. They have to hold the shape of that pool And if you are too wild and crazy, you might bump into the boundary. But the boundary doesn't get angry, it just exists. It's just there. And so I teach parents how to hold that line and to know that it's kids' jobs to make sure the boundaries are there so they feel secure and that we don't have to be angry about them doing their job because we're just going to do our job and hold that boundary for them.
Yeah, well, that's kind of my next question is, sometimes when I'm in the midst of things and it's gotten to that point where I do feel like I've been ignored and feel like I'm doing everything right, I got the other steps down. It's hard to remember sometimes how to get it right if we ourselves are getting frustrated. And so I'm wondering if you have anything that would help kind of summarize this, or how do you help the parent who is now getting angry and the rule book is going out the window?
Absolutely. First, I let them know that they're human. It's supposed to be hard sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with them if they are feeling frustrated or overwhelmed because you're raising another human being who has a completely different brain than yours. That's hard. So, resting on that, knowing that it's okay. We have feelings. Feelings are not bad things. Um, I One of my favorite mantras that got me through age 3 with both of my children was I'm 30, he's 3. I'm 30, he's 3. I'm 30, he's 3. Because I really wanted to have a big epic fit just like him sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And I would repeat that over and over to myself in my mind, sometimes out loud because that might help more, just to remind myself that I'm the adult here. Of course, he's terrible at managing his emotions. He's only had 3 years to practice. I've had 30 years and I'm not always great at it either. And to really put myself in their shoes, to remember that we're both doing the best that we can. And that if I am able to stay present like that, that I'm going to feel better about the choices that I'm making later on. If I have lost that presence, I'm going to be reacting and most likely make choices that I'm not so happy about later on. And that'll happen. And if that happens, you reconnect, you apologize, you make a plan for how you should move forward differently next time. But if we can avoid it, all the better for both of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that one of the last things you said there was about apologizing, and I feel like this does not come up enough in these type of conversations or theoreticals when we're talking about best practices here. It's recognizing that you're gonna mess up,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that we ask kids to apologize for, I mean, it can happen all day long for a child.
Yep.
To say you're sorry, do this, be polite. And I think there's a mindset where people feel that to be a good parent or to be a good leader, you don't show that. You don't show that weakness. You're because you're so confident, you wouldn't apologize for your mistakes. And I find it to be one of the quickest routes to connection is when I can say to a child, hey, I don't have all the answers here. And, I screwed up earlier and like, I'd like to try this again. And when they see that, and see that you're asking to be on the same team and are genuinely apologizing, I think that enables that connection to happen a lot faster than just playing it cool all the time.
You're so correct. And you hit the nail on the head. The reason that adults struggle to apologize is because a true apology requires vulnerability. And the majority of adults today were raised in a way that vulnerability was not a safe choice. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. That kind of mentality, because our parents were also raised in a way that vulnerability wasn't a safe choice and countless fathers I've talked to are so worried for their children's future, particularly their sons' futures, because they cry and they're 3. And they are so afraid that they will not be strong enough because the world has taught them that vulnerability is the absolute last choice. You should never be vulnerable if you can avoid it. And so there's a whole chapter on vulnerability in my book, based in large part off of Brene Brown's work, because it is such a powerful choice. It takes immense strength to be vulnerable. And we do worry that that will somehow shatter our authority. And what it does instead is it makes our children trust us. It helps them to develop a trust in the world and how the world works, and that not only is mom a good leader or is dad a good leader, but they own their mistakes. They fix it. They make it better when they do something wrong. And it's such a powerful lesson. If we want children to have ownership of their choices and to take responsibility and step up and make things right, we have to be willing to show them how to do that. They're not born knowing that. We are the ones that build that into them by our example. And so everything has a trade-off. Yes, it's uncomfortable to put yourself into a vulnerable position, especially with a child. And you're trading that for teaching your child how to truly be a responsible, respectful adult. And I think that trade-off's worth it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I would suggest for anyone who is unfamiliar with Brene Brown's work to immediately stop listening to this podcast and go check out at least her top YouTube video or two. Her works around vulnerability and shame, and she's the expert at that. And it's really, really important information to have for any relationship, really, even relationships with ourselves.
Most definitely. She's a genius. I absolutely love her work. And I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. Just even if you do nothing else but watch her YouTube videos, some of her speeches, I feel like should be mandatory watching material.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The dealing with 3 and 4-year-olds, I know that sometimes because so much of their thinking is not formal or in that frontal part of the brain, sometimes you need to rely on some other methods. And I'm wondering if you have any favorite little tips or tricks when it comes down to really just changing the mood in the room in a quick way. That any tricks like that you have to recommend?
Absolutely. So I have 2 that I use all the time, and I find that they work for our own children, but they also work for kids that we maybe haven't had a chance to establish a secure bond with yet, because you are speaking in their language. So they're both play-based. One is a challenge, so you might challenge them to a race against the clock. My kids are so familiar with this challenge that if I change my tone and start to count, it automatically is assumed to be a game, and it's playful and it's fun, and they will race. So what that would look like for my kids who have had experience with this is, I need you to walk to the table and sit down and eat your dinner. They're not listening. 1, 2. And it's funny because there's obviously that like negative counting where like I'm going to do something bad if you get to 3 or whatever, but this is totally different because it's become a game. And so then they'll look at me with like their little squinty eyes, and I'm like, I bet you can't get there before I get to 3. And they'll run and run and run and run and run and race and get there, or 10 or 30 or whatever it is. And it makes it fun. You've now taken what could become a stressful situation and made it playful. And if you're used to counting as a punishment strategy, then you you can use this, but count in reverse and stop counting, because you're just telling your kids they don't have to listen to you till you get to 3. But that's a whole other soapbox. But
Yeah.
but counting in this way as a game, making it fun, do a countdown. One of the ways my kids never wanted to get in his car seat until his car seat was a rocket. And takeoff was in 10 seconds, man. If you're not buckled by 10, like, you're going to miss the launch. And it's so simple and it's so silly and so fun. And I can be buckling the baby while I'm counting down to 10, and they're in, they're safe. We move on, no fight. So that's one that I really enjoy. It's super fast, doesn't require any supplies. Take it with you wherever you go. As they get older, you can even count by tens. Or one of the things my mom used to do with her countdown when we got a little bit older is she'd start dividing the last number. So she'd say, 2, 1.5, 1, half, 1/4, and you obviously have to be older to understand fractions, but it would be very funny to us to see how much she could divide it down, and it just took the tension away. The second one is to sing. So I enjoy singing. Don't know that I'm excuse me. I don't know that I'm necessarily great at singing, but I enjoy singing. And because of that, singing helps me to stay calm. So I might sing just about anything. With really little kids, I teach them the cue, uh-oh, but in a sing-song voice. And it helps me to remember I am dealing with a toddler here. So, they push all their food off the table. Uh-oh. And they know, like, that wasn't the best thing, but I'm calm and we're going to solve this problem. And, in that case, we need to pick it up. But if I start shouting and being angry, now they've shut down and now it's a fight. So even little tiny singings like that, sometimes I keep myself calm by singing. And, when I do need to repeat myself, but I'm a little bit on edge because, it's been a day.
Right,
Like,
right.
I told you it is dinner time. Let's stand up and walk to the table. And
Nice.
I'm singing because it makes my mouth smile. And changing your physiology can change your anger level. And if you are not one to randomly burst into song, just turning on a song on your phone or TV or whatever can change the energy in the whole house. So
Yeah, that it kind of reminded me of. I'm thinking of maybe for someone who doesn't want to sing, almost like ringing a bell or like those little meditation bells. Those are really great for just focus and with the same mindset that it's not an angry bell, it's
yeah.
not an alarm bell. It's just kind of another sense that can draw attention away from whatever is causing the kid to knock the food on the off the table in the first place. Tell us about your book and what S.U.R.E parenting is.
Yeah. So my book is called S.U.R.E Parenting: Building Blocks to Create Their Best Childhood. And I created S.U.R.E Parenting because when I was on my journey to parent differently than I was parented, I found a lot of things that I could do, but I was struggling with a lot of the work that needs to be done by the parent on themselves. And it's great to say, stay calm, but how?
Right.
How do you do that? Especially if you were raised in a volatile environment where you learned that conflict was dealt with by screaming and shouting and whatever else. So, S.U.R.E parenting, S.U.R.E is an acronym. It means self-honoring, unique, respectful, and empathic. And these are what I call the 4 pillars. It's important, so important for parents to honor who they are. And in order to do that, you have to know who you are. So it takes some self-evaluation and some digging in and figuring out, how your brain works, how you perceive the world, what are your lenses, how are you judging things. And then the unique part comes in because every human is unique, every child is unique, every parent is unique. So there's no silver bullet, just do this every time something goes wrong and life will work out great. There is a problem solving approach to each problem, but it's not a matter of one thing that you just do over and over and over again because every situation is unique. And part of honoring yourself is understanding where you are unique and where your kids are unique and honoring that in them. And then respectful, empathic, I think are a little bit self-explanatory, but respect begets respect. And empathy is the key to learning. If you can empathize with another human and understand where they're coming from and what they're attempting to accomplish, what needs they're trying to meet, you are going to be able to reach them and teach them infinitely better. So that's what S.U.R.E means. In the book, I break down building blocks based off of, what we say we want in our relationship with our kids, how we parent to get that, what we need to parent that way, how we develop those three skills, and then the key to it all, which is self-honor. So it is a
Nice.
good read. It's designed to, you can read it all at once, or you can really just read one section and implement that section. So for people who need smaller bite-sized pieces, it is designed to be broken up that way.
Nice. And you're obviously gifted at giving messages in a clear, kind of sequential way. We can tell from this conversation. So
Thank you.
I'm assuming the book. I haven't read it. I'm assuming that it's laid out in a very clear way.
Yes.
Also makes you great at working with 3 and 4 year olds, huh?
It does help.
Yeah. So, what other resources do you recommend most to people?
Any work by Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Bryson, pretty incredible. The Whole Brain Child, the Yes Brain, No Drama Discipline, they are just coming out with a new one called The Power of Being Present, I believe. I love their work. I absolutely love their work. Some maybe lesser known little really useful resources. There's a book called Alpha Breaths, and it is a mindfulness book for children, and each letter of the alphabet introduces another mindful breathing, and my kids love it. It is by Christopher Willard. It's by Christopher Willard and Daniel, really long last name that starts with an R.
Okay. We'll find it and put a link. Alpha Rest?
Alpha Breaths, like you're breathing.
Okay.
So that's a really, really good one. And then there's another book called What to Do When You Worry Too Much by Don Huebner. And that one is written to children who are struggling with anxiety or what she calls worry thoughts, and gives them really practical, valuable strategies for managing over worrying. And parents can read it and learn a lot too. So the parent reads it to the child. But
yeah, I was just about to ask you, what do I do?
It's so good. It likens worry thoughts to tomato plants, and the more you water them, the more rapidly they grow. My kids love this analogy, and how to kind of interrupt your own worry patterns. And one of my favorites is essentially that, if you to visualize that worry thought sitting on your shoulder and flick it off, things like that really empower kids in these playful but very profound ways so that they can manage things that are often very hard for kids to manage. So those are two little things. BigLifeJournal.com for growth mindset stuff is incredible. I recommend that all the time. Hand in Hand Parenting, Brene Brown, we already talked about. L.R.Knost. Dr. Mona Delahooke has a book called Beyond Behaviors that is incredibly eye-opening for anybody who's dealing with a school-age child who has some big challenges at school, up to and including kids with specific disabilities like maybe autism or ADHD or something like that. That's all in there. And so that was a really excellent book as well. Oh, and one last one. Dr. Kim John Payne, he wrote Simplicity Parenting. And I feel like every parent should read that book in today's day and age. It is it empowers us. Again, obviously I use that word a lot, but my Facebook group isn't called Empowering Moms to Uplift Kids for a reason. And he empowers you to take stock and simplify your world and have no regrets about doing it. So
Yeah, that's a great place to start, is just looking at what can be simplified and cutting out the extra stuff so you can focus on what's important. That's great. Okay, so where can we learn more about you and your workshops and anything upcoming that you have planned?
Absolutely. So everything will be on www.sureparenting.com. There's links there to my YouTube channel where I post a video every Thursday. My podcast is linked there. My free Facebook community is linked there. And then my Instagram is linked there too. I'm pretty sure it better.
Amazing. And you have a baby.
I do. I have a baby, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
Yes, I just needed to point that out when I hear people who are doing so much. Yeah, it's amazing.
I have a very amazing, supportive husband. I think that's worth mentioning too. He is with all 3 of our kiddos right now, so that I can do this without tiny people interrupting.
Nice. Well, I'm sure they're eager to get your attention again. So
yes.
We're closing up the show here. Do you have any parting thoughts or anything that you feel like we should have talked about that you'd like to say?
I just want to say that I firmly believe that our children choose us before they're ever born, and they choose us for a reason. So when you hear me or somebody else talking about their parenting and you have that thought of, oh, I could never be like her, or, I can barely get the laundry washed and I only have 1 kid. What on earth? How can she do it all? Stop comparing. We have different lives. We have different goals. We have different ambitions, and we have different gifts that we give our children in our strengths and in our weaknesses. And your kids chose you. They didn't choose me. And, fortunately, my kids chose me. Sometimes I wonder why, because I have those same thoughts. You are not alone. But take heart in that and know that you are the perfect parent for your child.
Great. All right, Sami. Well, we will put links to the stuff we talked about and try to get this show out as soon as possible. And I really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone out there listening, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.